Good morning, Metalheads here, and welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown. And today we're looking at the latest album from Port Noir entitled The New Routine. I kind of took a chance listening to this album because I honestly don't really know a lot about Port Noir. I've only really recently heard of them after seeing a review of this album from the Metal Triss. And I was very intrigued. I liked this description of a modern new prog kind of album with pop influences and contemporary influences. It just sounded interesting. It sounded neat. It sounded funky and fresh and different. Something new for the Metal Meltdown. And after doing some research, I was even more intrigued to find that this band at one point was a full-blown post-metal band, very much in the vein of Rosetta, or even like a doomier take on some of the more modern Deftones material. And with all of that knowledge, my curiosity simply got the better of me, and suddenly I needed to know, how does this post-metal alternative metal band go from being, well, that, to being what the Metal Triss now describes as prog pop? And the answer I found was deeply satisfying, as The New Routine is probably one of the most unique albums I've heard so far this year. It doesn't sound like anything I've really heard in a while from the world of prog or alternative music. It's funky, it's catchy, it's slick, it's kind of sexy, it's still very smart, and it even retains all of its heaviness. Granted, with all that in mind, there will probably be some debate amongst some of you whether or not this is worthy of the Metal Meltdown, if this is even a metal album, to which I have to say, A, still kind of falls within the spectrum of rock, which I still cover, and B, even if it didn't, who fucking cares? My channel, shut the fuck up. That latter point is sometimes difficult for some of you to swallow, so I will say it again. This is my channel, I review what I want. And I want to talk about this album because it's really fucking cool. One thing I love about this record right away is how accessible it is. The vocals are incredibly warm and welcoming and sweet. The choruses are really simple, but they dig straight into your ear like a little worm. The sound is very slick, a lot of big, beefy bass lines, a lot of great guitar riffs, modern contemporary influences, industrial drumming, synth-pop atmospheres, hip-hop beats from time to time thrown into the fray to mix things up. It weirdly balances the allure of bands like Muse and Tool and brings it down to earth with rock and roll goodness via influence from, I would say, Queens of the Stone Age in its most obvious moments. Particularly the most recent glam and pop-soaked Queens of the Stone Age on their record, Villains. Opening track Old Fashioned in particular really blows me away. Its chorus is a little repetitive, but they actually use it to pretty good effect as the song continues to build and build on top of a pretty simple synth-pop kind of bass with a lot of new prog influence, before turning up the bass and adding some more synth parts, and also elevating the chorus on top of it. It's slick and smooth, kind of futuristic, and I really enjoy it. It kicks the album off really nicely. It's just heavy enough, too, to meet my metal needs. Although, with that being said, I'd like to point out that some of my favorite tracks on the record are actually the ones that lean heaviest towards almost full-blown pop music. Take, for instance, a song like Blow, which is, frankly, sexy, for lack of a better word, with pulsating guitars, a great dance-like kind of beat. I could actually picture this song being a big radio hit and being played in rock clubs and being played at dance halls and all that shit. It's just got a really great vibe to it. As does a song like Lowlights, which is a little bit more ambient and, in my opinion, kind of brings in influence from the more experimental stuff from The Weeknd. Of all the tracks on this album, it's easily the least influenced by rock music, instead focusing on very minimalistic synth parts, some electronic beats, and a very subtle but interesting little guitar riff that keeps the attention when the vocals start to build up. Now, obviously, this isn't going to be for everyone. Obviously, if you're watching a show called The Metal Meltdown, then you're obviously looking for, at the very least, some good rock. And don't worry, because like I said, you're covered on that end as well. Take, for instance, a song like Champagne, which brings in that modern new prog influence and adds a lot of psychedelic tinges, I would say. It adds some weird synthesizers. It adds some weird effects to the vocals. Not to mention a super dirty bass line that weirdly kind of harkens back to early 2000s alternative metal. Not that I'm complaining, because I kind of have a soft spot for that kind of shit. Or a song like 13, which is an incredibly explosive number that weirdly feels like very early Rage Against the Machine, but with post-rock tinges, with an explosive chorus to boot, and some cute little references to Intergalactic from Beastie Boys. I honestly don't know how a lot of you are going to respond to this record. I mean, it's a very different record. It is noticeably much more rooted in pop and R&B and even hip-hop than it is in hard rock and heavy metal. The band themselves even admit that they're not really influenced by a lot of heavy metal and hard rock. In fact, they note that nowadays they probably are more inspired by The Weeknd and Daft Punk, and if they are influenced by rock. It's by more contemporary bands like Queens of the Stone Age. They Stay Here, Death from Above 1979. They do say Rage Against the Machine, to be fair. And I can't find this interview anymore, but I'm pretty sure I did find an interview at one point while researching this album that stated that they were also even influenced by Kanye West. I would even say specifically I can kind of hear influence from Kanye's Kids See Ghosts project in the way that some of the layers on this record are arranged and in the way that some of the beats are presented. With that in mind, if you're one of those super elitist metalheads that is completely ignorant to pop music, you would not listen to pop music if it meant curing fucking cancer itself, then yeah, maybe you need to stay away from this thing. However, if you stay open-minded and just take the album for what it is, maybe even approach it as a pop album rather than even a rock album, I think you will find a lot to enjoy here. And again, I personally still got my metal needs satisfied. I still got my riffs, I still got my sick bass lines, I still got some cool choruses. You know, I'm not particularly picky, shall I say. I don't need everything to sound like Judas Priest or Metallica or whatever. So I'm going to give this thing a 3.5 out of 5. I really enjoyed this album. It's a new direction for progressive music, arguably. It is a new direction for Port Noir, definitely. It's definitely very different from their other records, but I think in a good way. And there are enough of those older elements in the sound, particularly in the vocals, that I don't think it would be a massive shocker if you're already aware of this band. Really, the only complaint I have is that the second half of the album isn't quite as strong as the first half, and that generally speaking across the album, as interesting as the arrangements are, you do kind of wish in some parts that they were a little bit more creative and we weren't dealing with the typical verse-chorus structure. It does become a little bit predictable and repetitive with that in mind. It remains pretty fresh, again, thanks to all the band's outside influences coming into play, and again, thanks to their performances, but it's something to note nonetheless. I think that more than anything else would probably turn an actual prog fan away, but again, there's a lot of different influences, and it actually, you know, progresses to something in the way that progressive music is supposed to, so it could just be a minor bump in the road rather than a full-blown obstacle. Very curious to see what a lot of you had to say about it. I know for a fact there's one motherfucker that's probably going to be like, why didn't you review my favorite underground death metal album from Kvelterfuck Box or something? To which I have to say, once again, my channel, I do what I want. I still don't understand why that's so difficult for some of you to comprehend. I would just repeat what I said before as well. I would not approach this the same way that I would approach, you know, your average metal album. I would approach it more like a pop album, and I would approach it with a very open mind. And I think if you do those things, you will find a lot of really interesting stuff here, and you will still have your basic heavy metal needs met. Once again, 3.5 out of 5, a very interesting, very different record, and I'm very happy I checked it out. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be. So what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? Thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.